Hello, and welcome to another edition of Sharpe Takes. Today, it's great to have with us from the Public Assets Institute, 70U, Steph Yu. I think I pronounced it
Yep, you
properly,
got it.
who is very knowledgeable about education finance. So I think we'll at least start talking about education finance. What maybe a review of what Public Assets Institute proposed, and then maybe what's going on in the legislature, both in the House proposal and Senate proposal. So welcome, Steph. It's great
Thanks.
to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Why don't we start with a little review of where Public Assets Institute is
Sure.
at?
Sure. So I think there's a couple pieces. So I think we've been talking a lot about the fact that income sensitivity has really gotten out of whack when it comes to our education finance system. And so we have what we've been calling these tax cliffs that people can run into because the thresholds for income sensitivity haven't been changed in decades. And so they're scooping up a lot more low and middle income people, Vermonters, into these cliffs, and they end up paying a much bigger share of their income in school taxes. So our goal was to fix those cliffs one way or another, and then ultimately move to income-based taxes. But the governor made this proposal back at the beginning of session that kind of went the other way, which sort of leaned into property taxes as a way of public paying for public education. But there's also a much bigger conversation happening, I think, around what are the goals of public education, how, it's not just how we pay for it, but it's also how we distribute the money, who needs more help, how we evaluate how schools are doing. So the conversation is really just a whole lot bigger than just the financing now.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you mentioned how we pay for it and how it goes to the schools, because there really are sort of two different discussions in some ways. So how we pay for it, taxes can be income based, or this convoluted system that we have now, which is part income based and part property tax based with cliffs here and there.
Hmm.
Um, it could be strictly income, as some have advocated for years, and some of your projections have analyzed, and then um, moving more towards the property-based system. I think that's where the legislature is at, and the governor certainly was at in his proposal.
Hmm.
There are different ways to do that. Is there agreement in terms of taxing and money in the sense of instead of income sensitivity, having a fixed amount or a certain amount of the property value discounted, or where are we at with that?
So I don't, things are changing by the minute. So it's hard to
Yeah.
say exactly where we're at right now, but I can say that it looks like the House went along with the governor in sort of the leaning into property taxes through a homestead exemption approach. And that is also what the Senate Finance Committee is discussing, now
As we speak.
as we speak, probably. And so I think they all like the idea of a homestead exemption, which is essentially for residential property taxpayers, you exempt some portion of the home's value, and that exemption amount is dependent somewhat on your income, but it's also but the main driver of your tax bill would be your property value. So some percentage or some flat amount of your value would be exempt from taxes, but your tax bill would really be primarily driven by primary value. And our main concern with that is that primary value is just not the value of your primary home is not a good measure of ability to pay for low and moderate income people in particular, but also at the high end, it's not a good measure of ability to pay. Pretty much all the way through, especially with property values growing as fast as they are in Vermont. Because what happens is on the low end, your property value really overstates your ability to pay because you have a mortgage. Sometimes you have student loan debt, car debt, whatever that might be. So your net worth could actually be negative, and yet your primary home value is going to look
Hi.
positive,
Yeah.
right? So it's not a good measure on that end. And then on the high end, it's really a small sliver of your net worth. So for, the highest income folks, the most wealthy folks, they might have multiple properties and they have lots of other assets. So we're sort of punishing the people for whom the primary home is their main or only big asset by
Yeah.
by assessing taxes that way.
No, that's a problem, I think.
Yeah.
Um, so, hmm. So then we're talking about money out, and the drive for that has been this notion that some school districts did not use tax capacity generated by the weights to address higher need
Hmm.
students. So the notion then was, okay, we'll go to a amount of money that we'll send to school districts, and they'll sort of have to spend more
Right.
on these high need students. Is that actually happening, or does it depend on what the foundation amount is?
So I think there's a couple different questions that you're raising in that. So the first question is whether the weights, the changes to the weights, which were passed in 2022, but really didn't go into full effect until 2025, whether they worked or not.
Yeah.
And I think the answer is nobody knows. And the reason that nobody knows is because there were so many other confounding factors going into FY25, which included one of the biggest was teacher healthcare, right? Big jump in the cost of healthcare. So schools were dealing with so many other costs outside of their control that their budget decisions really weren't driven by the weighting changes much.
Loss of COVID funding
Loss
too,
of
right?
COVID funding, mental health care needs for kids, a whole bunch of stuff. Inflation was a big one.
Yeah.
Those were the big four that were identified by the Agency of Education as being the main cost drivers, but they affected all districts.
Yeah.
Some more than others,
Yeah.
but almost every district needed an increase for reasons outside of the weights and outside of their control. So that kind of left us with not really knowing what the effect of the weights were because we really couldn't isolate them. But I think the other piece of the question then is, so what happens under a foundation system? So so and you're raising this point, which is that there's no guarantee under a weighting system that money goes to the kids who need it. There's also no guarantee that the district even raises more resources. They could just take the tax break and move on. And I think, again, we don't really know what they would have done in a normal year because we haven't had one yet.
Yeah.
But we could talk more about where foundation goes, but I don't know if that was a clear enough explanation of that piece.
No, that was good, and it was a good start. I think what several people have said is this foundation formula works, provided it's done right.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean? What does done right mean?
It's a big question. I think for us, so what we know is that our foundation system before 1997 was not done right, right? It
Yeah.
didn't work well, and that's why it was thrown out as unconstitutional because it created these stark disparities between rich towns and poor towns. Now, the House's plan made a lot of efforts to kind of smooth that to limit the amount of disparity that could happen. They did two things. One, they capped the amount that you could spend above the foundation, which was part of the problem pre-Brigham, pre-1997, right? There wasn't really a cap. So it was essentially a floor for rich towns and a ceiling for poor towns, right? Like
Yeah.
rich towns could spend as much as they wanted above.
Right.
That's what led to these big disparities. And that's what's true in a lot of states that have foundation systems now. But the House is trying to limit that, and I think what they designed is a pretty smart idea of limiting the amount that you can spend above, but also tying the amount that you get per pupil to what would be raised in the least property wealthy town. So there's a couple things that they're doing to kind of limit that. But there's a couple big questions I think that remain in how that works. One is everybody's talking also about a lot of consolidation. So the governor's plan was 5 districts. The House and Senate are sort of, it looks like they're kind of going to kick that decision for at least another year to a advisory group or a task force or something. But they're somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 20, maybe 25 districts. So still a whole lot of consolidation. And there's no answers to the questions of how the money gets distributed within these big districts.
Mm.
You might have one small board, so not even every town in the district would have representation on that board. And how it gets distributed across schools is a pretty big question mark there.
I think we should spend a little bit more time understanding what is meant by this notion of a foundation formula. So as I understand it, a sort of base amount goes to a school district for every head, every student,
Mm-hmm.
pupil count
Mm-hmm.
in that district.
Mm-hmm.
And then that number is increased for the what we used to call pass weights, the weighted students. So the base, I think, coming out of the House was maybe around 15,000,
Mm-hmm.
and then that would be increased X number of $1,000 for low-income families, and a little bit more for English language learners. If you're both, you get them stacked. If they're separate, it doesn't stack, but it all works to increase this base amount.
Right.
And from my perspective, are we building a lot more cliffs right back into the system by doing this?
It's a good question. So I think so you're right that the governor's foundation, so I think that was a good description of the foundation system. It's essentially a one size fits all approach, but then it's weighted for districts that have more kids in some of these categories. The weighting categories change a little bit in the House. They're approaching small schools a little differently and some other things. So they're not exactly the weights that we have now. It's a different system. But those weights are also being applied to the same amount. Where in our current system, right, the weights are applied to whatever the per pupil spending amount is in the district. So they're really worth different amounts in different districts. Under this system, one size fits all for kids in economic disadvantage, one size fits all for ELL, with a few adjustments for things like small schools and sparsity, not built into weights, but set aside as grants. So, but so I think there's a lot of questions that sort of are still unanswered about the foundation system. But one of the questions, so the governor starts in the 13-ish thousand. The House passed a 15, right, like you said, right around 15,000. The Senate is somewhere in the ballpark of 14, but they're also not committing to a number yet. I'm not sure that they will this year. Um, and there's two issues with that big concerns that we have. The first of which is that what we're not there's a lot of focus on the fact that you're going to bring up some of the low spenders. There's a lot less conversation about how many of the higher spenders you're forcing down. And in our latest analysis, it's not 50-50, but it's probably 60-40, right? Like you might be bringing up six, and again, it's do you look at the number of students? Do you look at the towns? Do you look at the districts? Take your pick. But the point is, quite a few districts will have to be brought down.
Yeah.
So that's one big concern. But the other big concern is that it's a really blunt instrument for this problem. Basically, what you're saying is that the best measure of whether you're succeeding as a school district is how much you spend per pupil. And the only thing we're going to focus on is bringing up the lower spenders, regardless of whether their outcomes are good, regardless of how many kids, how many kids are in that district, sort of regardless of whether they have made cuts, haven't made cuts. There are districts that are kind of in the middle of the pack on spending who have been making cuts to stay that way.
Yeah.
And they may have had big cuts in language or arts or whatever it might be. So it just feels, and part of our analysis, another piece that we looked at is the low spenders and the high spenders aren't the same from year to year. There are very few districts that are consistently low spending or consistently high spending. Most sort of like drop for whatever reason, something comes up. They get more kids than they expected in a given year, and vice versa, right? A family leaves a district, a small district, that can make a big difference from year to year. So they tend to pop up or down for a year or two at a time and then come back closer to the mean. So it feels like a very blunt instrument when we're not really identifying which kids in which districts really need more resources. I think there's a lot of good intentions in the sense that I think a whole lot of people want to make sure that kids get the resources that they need. I also think that there's a whole lot of people who just want to spend less on public education. And so both those forces are coming into play in this conversation.
Yeah. Not to mention a bunch of people who want to favor private education over public. So the more you can suppress education in public schools, the more advantageous or attractive private education looks.
Absolutely.
And that's certainly happening in our state.
Absolutely.
So you talked about 60% are going to be able to spend
Don't
more
quote
per
me on that number, but yes.
but
yeah.
some number.
Some chunk, yes, definitely.
And likely more than half.
Mhm.
That means nearly half are going to be asked to cut or spend less per pupil. Um, I can foresee in communities that have wealth, that have a high education of the parents and community members, and have a high value of education in their community, they're going to go right to the max. If it's 10% or 5% or 15% that they can increase, they might even go over that number. So if we have 40%, let's just play with numbers. If we have 40% of the school districts, let's say half of those go the full 10% right off the bat. So that's going to create this disparity we were trying to get rid of with the foundation formula, right? And with the income sensitivity. What happens to that? Is that 10% unbridled, or is there some mechanism by which the education fund is rebalanced by the 10%? Is the foundation amount increased by any number due to the spending of these high value towns?
So the House plan does address some of this. So again, caps the spending above foundation at 10%, but then also ties the yield from that rate to what the lowest town brings in. So if you're one of the richer towns, and and that tax rate, the sort of determined tax rate for spending up to 10%, brings in more than it would in a poorer town, that extra just goes into the pot. So it is spread out in that way. So I do think that the House has sort of, you know, taken a lot of steps to kind of mitigate the pre-Brigham problems of sort of unbridled spending at the top. The governor's plan didn't do anything. Unclear where the Senate's going to land. So, I don't know what ultimately will happen. But I do think that that is a big question. And I keep coming back to this other question, which is the within district spending. Suddenly you have these big districts. And so you might be able that the House plan might do a good job of keeping the disparities relatively small across districts, but across schools within districts is where it's going to land now. I think that's the thing to be looking at. And who's determining that? How much is the public going to have a say in that? How much, are small towns sort of going to be constantly overruled by the bigger towns in those scenarios? So I think that's a really big unknown in this bigger district world.
So to pursue that thought a little bit, here in this district, one of the small elementary schools that was targeted for closure by the superintendent and the school board for a while was targeted partly because it had a $28,000 per pupil cost. The biggest reason, I mean, there were several obviously, but the biggest reason was that they had highly educated veteran school teachers. So if you have a master's degree and you've been teaching for 25, 30 years, your salary is near the top of the salary scale. And you put three of those teachers in a small elementary school, now you're going to have really high per pupil costs.
Tips the scales
And
quite a bit. Yeah.
and is that one of the pieces that you're thinking about? Is that as a more uh, uh, highly sought after culture or elementary school, brings in these or keeps these high quality, high paid teachers. Now, are they going to get uh, what's going to happen to
Yeah.
them?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I mean, I think it's worth noting that the Agency of Education did put out a pretty good report that looked at, you know, do small schools cost more per pupil as a group? And the answer is not necessarily, right? So there's a huge range. To your point, there's a huge range across small schools, and there's a pretty big range across bigger schools, right? So it's not automatic that a small school is going to spend more per pupil than a big school. There's a lot of things that go into that. And again, to your point, there's a lot of these kind of historical factors or moving target factors like teachers, like who the staff is at any given moment, like where you are in a school construction project, all these sort of factors that kind of don't have many schools or districts starting from the same place. And so, how much flexibility do we want in that system as a state? And how much flexibility and how much sort of do we want to kind of standardize what that looks like? One of the things that the state has done in recent years, you'd probably know better than I would how many years ago, but they went to this statewide healthcare process for teachers.
Yeah.
That's huge, right? But you're never going to get an exact salary scale. I mean, there are, to your point, like some towns are going to have to work harder to recruit teachers. And so that might come in the form of salary or other things. So there's never going to be a completely standardized level playing field, across these towns. And I'm not sure anybody wants that. I think people like what's unique about their districts. That's certainly what we've been hearing in doing town halls around the state. So you want to allow some flexibility, and that again, that kind of comes back to this concern about this sort of blunt instrument, one size fits all foundation approach.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. While you were speaking, I was just thinking, yeah, flexibility isn't and creativity. if we're all just average, then we have sort of average education and average outcomes. And where does the creativity and growth and experimentation and improvement come from? I think that's harder. And I really don't think Vermonters as a whole seek to have average schools.
Mhm.
I think many Vermonters, maybe even most Vermonters, would really value and look forward to having the excellent education that Vermont's been noted for decades. We've been in the top 5 in the country for decades. Do we really want to be 30th,
Right.
in our educational outcomes?
Mhm.
And like it or not, that costs money
Mhm.
to deliver good education.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worth noting. So we also look at sort of what we're spending on education over time, and maybe this has come up, but I think we're pretty flat over time, adjusted for inflation, and we're spending a similar amount of sort of our state resources, so share of the state budget, share of state dollars, on public education. It's come down a little bit with per pupil, right? There's been declining enrollment for a while, although some of that has leveled off, but but you know, we're basically putting the same share of the state budget into public education. And so I'm not sure that it's suddenly gotten too expensive. I think we have these problems in how we pay for it that harm low and moderate income Vermonters more. And so they're feeling the pressure of their school tax bills more than they used to. And we have property values going up, which means there's sort of more pressure from that perspective. But it doesn't mean that we're necessarily not investing in not like investing the wrong amount as a state.
Yeah.
But how it gets paid for is something we can fix.
Yeah, well, to an extent, I have often said there's plenty of money around. It's just only a few people have it.
Mhm.
And as long as there's that sort of shortage of money to buy groceries and pay bills and pay your taxes at for ordinary, if I might use that word, or regular Vermont citizens, that becomes tougher and tougher. And people get more and more upset about that, what I refer to as a bomb that goes off in your mailbox.
Yeah.
Sales tax leak out of your wallet every time you buy something. Income taxes are taken out of your paycheck, and often people get some sort of refund
Yes.
in April, so you don't
Doesn't hit the
feel
same way.
it doesn't have the same impact as that bill you get from the town clerk that says you owe 5 grand or whatever it is on your home.
We often talk about it as the most visible tax Vermonters pay. It
Yeah,
definitely gets the most attention because to your point, it smacks you in the face,
yeah.
once or twice a year. Yeah. Mm.
So where do we go from here? I mean,
Well, I mean, I do think that that is our biggest concern about the homestead exemption. Again, the House version of the homestead exemption is a pretty good, like they try to do more steps. The governor's plan is a fixed amount. It's pretty blunt. It does create a lot of cliffs. The House plan is much more gradual. But with the homestead exemption approach, it doesn't fix this fundamental unfairness in who pays, which is that the highest income Vermonters are paying based on property instead of based on income, while everybody else pays based on income. So the share of the low and moderate income Vermonters continues to be higher than the share of the highest income Vermonters. And so they have 2/3 of the income and they don't pay based on income.
yeah.
And so we keep coming back to unless you shift the taxes upward, which a homestead exemption plan won't do. Wherever you cut off that exemption, you're going to create a cliff and it's going to peak at that point, right? So it peaks in the middle in all of these plans. The middle income Vermonters would pay the most in any of these homestead exemption plans.
So that's what we need to peak the middle income payers and
That
slam them.
that seems to be the goal here. I mean, I do, I'm not sure why, like, we want a progressive system. I think most people want a progressive system. I think there's a lot of concerns that, you know, that people can hide their income or that kind of thing. But we know these people have 2/3 of the income and we're not taxing them based on income.
Yeah. You just roped in a whole nother conversation that I'd like to spend a couple minutes on, and that is that, in ancient times, property was pretty indicative of your ability to pay.
Mm-hmm.
And as people took, wage jobs and earn income,
Mm-hmm.
then the ability to pay shifted more and more over the years from property to income based.
Mm-hmm.
More recently, I'd say within the last decade, the share of wealth is an ability to pay is actually more indicative by what do I want to say, assets that
Mhm.
individuals and household own, whether that's stocks or
Mhm.
bonds or some sort of uh, uh, financial assets like that. And
Mhm.
we don't tax those at all, do we?
Right. So it is hard to do at the state level. There was a proposal in the House last year to look at a state wealth tax, but it's hard to do at the state level because the state doesn't have the ability to capture that information right now. But it has been something that's been proposed in a couple of the versions of these bills, which is let's start gathering that information. Neither income nor property nor primary home value is a perfect measure of your net worth. It doesn't tell us the whole picture
Right.
necessarily. Income tells you a better picture, I think, than primary value because of the sort of the reasons we talked about earlier. But neither is perfect because it is possible to have kind of a modest income but lots of assets. It's unusual, but it's possible. So I think, I do think that there is some interest in trying to get a better sense of people's whole financial picture in order to have a better sense of how to tax it. But we also, one of the ways we do that is through an estate tax. But that estate tax threshold has gone up and up because the federal threshold has gone up and up. So the states have sort of followed. So it's sort of picking up only a very narrow group of people. But that's sort of part of the theory, right? Is when if you have high net worth, those assets get taxed at the time of transfer or death. But I think for a lot of people, we want a better sense of it over the years and not just wait to be surprised when somebody dies or passes on a property.
Yeah. So we only have a few minutes left.
Sure.
I'd like to shift a little bit of time onto these other costs that school districts have had to undergo: mental health, loss of COVID funds, and healthcare, in particular healthcare. I think I read the other day that individual plans are being asked to be increased by over 20% and group plans by over 13%. That's another slam on education funding, isn't it?
It is, and it is. So Vermont has some of the highest healthcare costs in the country, has some of the fastest growth in recent years of plans on the exchange, and some of the highest costs in the country. And that's a huge part of what's going on with school budgets over the last couple of years. And that's sort of another concern we have about foundation, which is that a lot of the plans would adjust the foundation amount by inflation going into future years. But as long as the cost of healthcare grows faster than general inflation, school districts are getting
It's
squeezed.
it's really
It's
big.
really bad. So I think so that's the other concern is that none of these plans are really addressing some of those root causes of the cost drivers. What's going on with healthcare is a huge part of it.
So wait a minute.
Hmm.
None of these plans deal with these costs?
Correct.
That's tough.
It is tough. Um, I mean, I think there are a couple different proposals that would sort of temporarily bring down the cost. One of this idea of reference-based pricing. I don't know if you've paid attention to that, but this idea that reimbursement costs would be capped at some percentage, some multiple of Medicare reimbursement levels, and that would save some money. But it doesn't actually change how fast the cost grows, and if teachers are suddenly paying less in for their services than UVM or other hospitals, they're going to pick up that cost somewhere else. So in some ways, it just sort of pushes that cost in different directions. Even though it might take it off the property tax and the ed fund in the short term, I'm not sure how much it helps Vermonters in the big picture.
Yeah, and does public assets look at healthcare spending or healthcare finances?
So we've been looking in terms of the school piece, in terms of
Well, or in general?
general. We look at it a bit. There's a number of partners that we work with that sort of are much better, better versed in healthcare in particular. But part of what we have been looking at is the out-of-pocket costs. I mean, part of what we want to look at is the whole picture because to that point, a lot of times we might be able to slow the growth of a premium or slow the growth of on the exchange, but what that means is we're all paying more out of pocket, and that's not a solution either. That total we're spending on healthcare isn't really going down. It's just does it show up on the public books or not?
Yeah.
And so I think that is something that we look at and are sort of increasingly paying attention to with some of these big jumps in recent years.
So thank you very much for joining us today. This is a difficult and complicated conversation to have, and I very much appreciate you coming and the work that Public Assets Institute is doing. I recommend all of you take the time to go to the Public Assets Institute website and review some of their quite detailed and thorough financial analysis of what's going on, not only in schools, but in the general population. So thanks very much. And I think we're going to have you back after this the dust settles, if anything gets passed by the legislature that gets a governor's signature, and then we'll have a review process to figure out where we actually ended up.
Sounds good.
And I think we have to deal with some healthcare cost drivers and see where we're at with that. So thank
Great.
you very much for coming, and I look forward to future conversations.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for this edition of Sharpe Takes. Pay attention, it's your taxes that are at risk here. Thanks a lot for joining us.